So in this video, I'm going to talk more about suffixes. This time though, we're going to focus on the present and past participles and the suffixes used to form them. In addition to that, we're going to talk about the various functions that the present and past participles form. I've given you a worksheet, well, not a worksheet, a handout that goes along with this. If you've been in my class before and you've heard me talk about these before, then you can listen to this if you want to or ignore it if you don't want to hear it. I recommend listening to it though because it'll just take a few moments of your lives and it'll give you a chance to see my beautiful face. I'm just kidding. In fact, you can listen to it with your eyes closed if you don't like my beautiful face and actually think it's more of an ugly face. Also, if you watch it and you really don't like this, if you think it's boring, then make your children watch it as punishment. You know, if they're being ugly, loud babies, make them watch this over and over and over again. Next time they're being bad, just tell them, I'll make you watch my teacher talk about grammar if you're not behaving. All right, and that will work. That'll work. All right, so anyway, to the material. So as we've been talking about recently, vocabulary is, of course, an important topic. But despite its importance, it's taught in some kind of strange ways sometimes. Memorization is used for a lot of vocabulary, and I'm okay with people memorizing things. That's okay. But when there are rules for forming words, for creating or generating words, it's better to use those grammatical patterns. And like we've said, suffixes, word endings that can change meaning or part of speech, are a very common and important way of generating words from existing words. All right, so the suffixes we're going to focus on right now are the very familiar suffixes of ing, and ed. Now, familiar doesn't mean that their functions are necessarily well understood by everyone using them. In fact, they might be so familiar that they might seem easier and less complex than they really are. So let's talk about what they can do. So I've said before that we don't necessarily want to translate from one language to another, especially because some languages, like English and Japanese, for example, are not very compatible for translation. Not at all, not at least for direct translation. Certain parts of grammar are not compatible even with more closely related languages. So when we look at things like the ing form, it's a little bit dangerous to say, that's the continuous, or that's the gerund, because the ing form, the way we use it, might translate as the gerund or as the progressive in one language, but not in another. All right, so anyway, let's go ahead and start talking about ing, what's called the present participle. A participle is just a word form that's created from a verb, from an action word. All right, so participles always come from verbs. Some important examples of those are the verb to bore, to interest, to excite. All right, and the present participle of those is the ing form, boring, interesting, exciting. Now, if I just say, what is boring? What does it mean? Don't answer that. I couldn't hear you even if you did, but I hope you didn't. The reason we can't answer that is we need context. Boring means nothing without situation context because the present participle can serve at least three functions. Continuous, as in you are boring me, ugly teacher, an action that's happening now. It can be the gerund, boring your students with long and annoying videos is mean. So the gerund is a verb form being used as a subject or object, a noun that can do something or receive something. So you are boring me with your video, stupid, ugly teacher. All right, that would be the gerund. And boring can also be an adjective, a word describing a person, place, or thing. The boring movie made me fall asleep. All right, so notice we've got three different functions. Boring can describe something, as in boring movie. Boring can be an action that's continuing, as in you are boring me right now. And boring can be a gerund, acting as a noun, so meaning it can do something or receive something. Boring your children is a form of torture. You're using that as the subject, the action called boring your children. All right, so something similar happens with the past participles. The past participles also have different functions that depend on context. You probably recognize the past participles as the forms used for the perfect tenses. I have eaten. So eaten is the past participle. Eat, base form. Ate, simple past. Eaten, past participle. Past participles can also be used for the passive voice when we focus on the receiver or object of an action instead of the doer. So active, the bear ate the ugly baby. Answers the question, what did the bear do? Passive, the ugly baby was eaten by the bear. Was eaten is the passive voice, and eaten is still the past participle. What I want to talk about quickly then is a final form of the past participle, or final function of the past participle, and that is its use as an adjective. An adjective describes something, remember, describes a person, place, or thing, or concept. So, bored is the past participle of the verb to bore. All right, so if you say, she bored me with her story, that is the past, simple past. If you use the past participle, I have bored thousands of students with ugly baby stories. That is perfect tense. I have bored students. All right. She was bored or is bored by her teacher, passive voice. But bored can also be a true adjective. The bored children fell asleep during the boring movie. Now, that last example I used is really important because that shows us something that we're going to actually be focusing on in our exercises related to this. Boring and bored can both act as adjectives. Interesting, interested. Frightening, frightened. Saddening, saddened. And that's not a coincidence, not an accident. This is the way, related to the way that we create certain adjectives. Many, many adjectives are formed from verbs, and specifically from participles, participial adjectives. Adjectives that describe feelings or states of being are especially common in these two forms, the ed, past participle, and ing, present participle. What I mean is, once again, that boring and bored can both be adjectives, but they don't mean the same thing. That's where we have to be careful. In general, so I said in general, there are exceptions. In general, if you have the adjective form with ing, like boring, you will also have a partner with Ed bored. All right, the difference is that the ing one describes a cause, something that makes someone or something feel a certain way or be a certain way. A boring movie causes someone to feel bored. All right, the Ed bored, a bored person feels bored. So the boring movie put me to sleep. Boring movie. I am bored. When is that guy going to shut up and stop bothering me with his stupid video? He's so boring. All right. So that's important because instead of learning to bore, boring, and bored as three different words, we can realize that those are basically three forms that are created from one general pattern. And that's true of so many words. All right, so in other words, native speakers of English don't learn when they're children that there's a word boring and a word bored. We might learn one or two or a handful of words like that, and then we start to realize if something is terrifying, it makes you feel terrified. If someone is interesting, the person makes you feel interested. All right, now for second language speakers, this can be a trap. If you say, I'm boring, someone might say, you are boring. That's why nobody likes you. So if you don't feel interested, if you're like, you feel bored, I am bored. All right. Well, I hope this has helped. I know it's kind of a long video, but it is a video, so you can rewind it, pick the parts you like. If you do try to sell it or something, though, then please share some of the profits, some of the money with me. All right? Good.